Well, hello, Pastor R. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We are ready to continue the conversation we started last time.
Yes.
And it was a heavy, very deep,
Yes.
probably painful conversation for some people. And it is very current as far as the events that are going on today. But we saw that it's just a mirror image of everything that was going on even in biblical times. So we're going to turn back to the Word and get started with that.
I'm reminded of the fact that Jesus came to bring restoration and renewal to us. We who are broken and fallen, He came to restore us back into rightful condition. Well, before Jesus came, Dr. Amir, there was one son ahead of him. His name was John the Baptist. He's one of my heroes, by the way.
Wow.
It says in John chapter 3, verse 22, that after this, Jesus and his disciples went out into the Judean countryside, where it's lovely, little hillsides, quietness, peace. The crowds weren't there.
Yes.
Where he could spend some time with his disciples, and he baptized.
Great.
So apparently what was happening was Jesus was himself baptized to identify with us. He'd said, to John, John had said to him, I have need to be baptized of you. And Jesus says, do this to fulfill all righteousness. So Jesus was providing an example to us of being obedient and following the Father. And so he himself was baptized, and then he baptized some others, some his own disciples perhaps, and some others who were baptized by Jesus. And John was also baptizing in a place called Aenon near Salim. Now this is the entrance into the Holy Land, the Promised Land.
Okay.
And so just where the people would come across the Jordan River, John, and as they came into the Promised Land under Joshua, so under John, they were hearing a message of repentance. Remember, John had some interesting dialogue with Herod, the ruling king. Herod had taken his brother's wife. Her name was Herodias.
Yes.
And, John was throwing a big dinner party for his guests. And the daughter of Herodias danced for Herod. And maybe she danced in a sexually provocative way.
Right.
And Herod, being somewhat drunk, said, whatever you want, up to half my kingdom. And so she went to her mother and said, what should I ask of the king? And he said, ask for the head of John the Baptist.
Wow.
So John the Baptist was beheaded by Herod because he was a righteous man who was calling the king to repent, as well as he was calling his nation to repent, to turn back to God. They had forsaken God, and now he was calling them back to obedience to God.
Right.
Well, they came to John, hearing that Jesus was baptized, and said, Rabbi, the man who was with you on the other side of the Jordan, well, the one you testified about, well, he is baptizing, and everyone is going to him. Now that really makes me happy that people were going to Jesus.
Sure.
That he was baptizing,
Yes.
because people were going to him, because he is the Messiah, the King.
Right.
And, we have gone to him, and we want others to go to him.
Yes.
To this John replied, a man can receive only what is given him from heaven. And I think what John was saying there, Dr. Amir, is some deep truth, that a man only has what God gives him. So every good and perfect gift comes from the Father above.
Right.
The Father gives us every good thing. So if something's good in our world, it's a gift from God.
Yes.
So our bodies are a gift from God.
Yes.
Our relationships are a gift from God. Our marriages are a gift from God. Our
That's
children, a gift from God. So what John was saying was that everything that we receive is a gift. We can open our hands to it and take in.
Right.
He said, you yourselves can testify that I said, I am not the Christ, but I am sent ahead of him. So John understood he was a forerunner to Jesus. He was to go ahead of him, prepare the way, that make the hills flatten, make the valleys raised up, that the people may come to the Lord. So then he said this, I'm sent ahead of him. The bride belongs to the bridegroom. Now when John uses this language of the bride and the bridegroom, he's primarily speaking here of two things. One is that in the Old Testament, the nation of Israel is considered the bride of God.
Yes.
that he had claimed her to himself.
Right.
He rejoiced much over her, and he expected from her fidelity. But what happened to the nation was that she went after other gods. She became unfaithful.
Right.
He gave the whole book of Hosea to talk about how his nation had become unfaithful to him, and how he was relentlessly pursuing her, drawing her back to himself. So the nation had become unfaithful, but he also was speaking here to the church, because the church is the bride of Jesus. And so Jesus is the bridegroom,
Yes.
and we are his bride. And he calls us to fidelity and faithfulness to
Sure.
submission to him.
Yes.
So he says the friend who attends the bridegroom. So he's likening himself here, Dr. Amir, to being like the best man.
Right.
The best man at the wedding,
Wow.
who's standing with the bridegroom, right? Listening for his voice.
Right.
And when he hears his voice, he says, he rejoices. You remember when...
That's very interesting. Very interesting.
Remember when John was just inside his mother Elizabeth,
That's right.
and his mother of Jesus, Mary, came to visit Elizabeth, and John the Baptist leaped for joy.
That's right.
She heard the voice of Mary, and because she was carrying Jesus, he rejoiced. So whenever he hears the voice of Jesus, it gives him joy. So, yes.
Wow.
So he's this bridegroom, Jesus is, and John is the attendant to the bridegroom, waiting, listening for him, full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. And he says, this joy is mine, and is now complete. As if he had been waiting and waiting and waiting
Right.
for Jesus to appear. And now Jesus has finally appeared on the scene, and he's with his disciples, and he's baptizing people, and people coming to him, doing miracles, all kinds of teaching. And John's rejoicing
Right.
that Jesus, the Messiah, is here.
Yeah.
And then he says some words, that he must become greater, and I must become less. That Jesus said of him, of all the men born to women, none's greater than John the Baptist because of his great humility. He was a prophet who wasn't about himself, wasn't about comparing himself to Jesus, competing with Jesus. He was all about submitting himself to Jesus and following the instruction of Jesus.
Right.
And as far as we know, John was a single man and lived his life in singleness out there in the desert, eating wild locusts and honey, dressing with camel hair.
Right.
Who probably have John as their husband. But he was a holy man, set apart to God and fulfilled his purpose. But I love the analogy about him being the friend to the bridegroom.
Right.
And the purity of the bride, waiting for the voice of the bridegroom. Maybe the illustration here would speak to the wedding night
Mm-hmm.
and the consummation of the marriage, and waiting to hear the bridegroom's voice. And the bridegroom has the bride, and they consummate their relationship. And when they do, there's great joy.
Right.
And so John is rejoicing in the bridegroom and the bride and their togetherness and their unity as God intended it to be.
It's fascinating. Very interesting. Yeah, but why else would they use that analogy? I mean, it's also that everybody understands that. Every man wants to find their bride. Every man wants to be united with their bride. Every man wants to be committed and have that committed relationship. That
Yes.
to enjoy that joy and ecstasy and the pleasure that nothing else can have. So.
Yes, the intimacy between a man and his wife
Yes.
is parallel to the intimacy of us in our relationship to God, of that level of joy and closeness that we feel when we're together
Right.
with somebody we deeply love.
That's incredible.
Yes.
That's incredible. Which is why God designed it so that there would be that hormonal chemical bond that also forms. So there's the mental, intellectual bond. There's the emotional bond, and then there's this physical bond. We talked about it last time. The hormone oxytocin gets released when there is that first time intimacy with someone.
Yes.
And the woman connects,
Mm.
gets plugged in permanently to that man. And that bond is very difficult to break, which is why we talked about how in relationships where there's abuse. The woman has a lot of trouble leaving. Can't walk away. Wants to walk away, but can't walk away. She stays in that abusive relationship. And if that relationship doesn't have the institution of marriage around it and over it, and it was done outside of marriage, and she can't leave, but there's no security that he's going to be there for her.
Yes.
And what will happen is, and we talked about how difficult it is for them to leave and how they're connected, but what we didn't talk about last time is that she eventually will tear off that Band-Aid. She eventually will break that bond, as painful as it is. And where you go, good, she finally got away from him. She finally got away from that relationship. And we talked about, even if that is a abusive thing from the very start, there is that bond that forms. And you go, okay, good, she left. Well, no. Yes, it's good that she left, but there's a permanent problem there now. The problem is the next bond that forms with the next person is not as strong. And it's easier to break. And now if there's a third and a fourth and a fifth relationship, the bond is very weak. That chemical, hormonal, physiologic bond that forms is not as strong and much easier to tear off. And that's why these relationships aren't lasting. Even when you say there's no abuse and he was a good guy, quote unquote, and she was a good gal, quote unquote, and why didn't they make it work, and why did they just quit? Why did they decide that they would walk away? It's because that chemical bond wasn't there to hold them together, to make her not, where before she couldn't walk away even if he was abusive. She couldn't leave him even if he was hitting her, or verbally abusing her, or sexually abusing her. She would stay. But now, it could be a small personality problem and she walks away because that bond is not strong anymore. It's been ripped off so many times. That Band-Aid is not as adhesive as it used to be, and it's much easier to break. There is a permanent, ongoing problem with these things that happen, and that's what we need to watch out for.
So I think about people that I know that are in very difficult situations and they can't leave, Dr. Amir, though they perhaps should create some space because they're terrified of the person, but they're terrified to leave. The relationship gives them some degree of stability or security. Like I know about this person's lifestyle and the quirks, but I can't quite leave because I'm afraid of what my life would be without them. And would you say that has to do with that oxytocin connection?
I think so. I think when there is a chemical hormonal bond, logic doesn't have as much power anymore. So that's when we think we'll never find anybody else. And now let's take it around to the other side, because it almost, for the person who may be listening, who has had the circumstances of multiple relationships, been abused, learned to walk away, has become strengthened, and in some cases there's the thought process of, now I am an independent person and I don't need anyone in my life. Well, we know, based on the Word, based on how we're created, we are only half of a being.
Yes.
We need our other half. We become complete when we're with our mate, and no matter how confident and comfortable you feel, you are only half of one.
It wasn't good for the man to be alone.
Exactly.
So God made it out for him.
Exactly.
Suitable to him.
Exactly.
Yes.
So and they unite and they become one.
Yes.
So so now that person might be thinking, well, then this is hopeless anyways, because I'm not going to be able to bind strongly with the man of my dreams, and I'm not going to be able to form that bond, and it's always going to be very easy to break. Or she may right now be in a marriage. She's in a marriage, and he's a great person, but that initial love is not there. And the everyday mundane life is taken over, and now there's other stressors, and she's starting to realize, well, I'm gonna have to work at this relationship. But it's very easy to rip off that Band-Aid. I wonder if I should walk away.
Yeah.
So what do you say to her? What does the word say about this? Now we're talking about divorce and how it's actually easy to get that divorce and walk away because she doesn't have that hormonal connection. How do we rebuild that? How do we create that bond and strengthen it?
So, in every state in America right now, there is no-fault divorce, saying that if a person wants to be divorced, there's a time period, usually a waiting period of 6 months to a year, within which a person has to sort of be separated from their spouse. But at the end of that time, they can be divorced really without any recrimination. Basically, it's all about property settlement and the custody of the children. So that now we've made it easy, if you will, for marriages to be dissolved.
Right.
I believe that marriage is a covenant between a man and a woman, and there are witnesses that we make our vows to God, to each other, and before witnesses. And those witnesses, in a sense, provide support and accountability. And so I think we have a role to encourage couples to work through their differences and resolve things, versus just say we're incompatible or our differences are irresolvable,
right,
and we need to walk away. I think most marriages can be resolved if we choose to love and if we choose to forgive. So I think love, we classically think about love as being a feeling, right? Our affections. But biblically, love is an action. So it means understanding the need of the person and choosing to meet that need. I mean, there was a time when, if you were hungry, your wife would make you something to eat. And now she says, I don't care if you starve to death. And there was a time when she wanted to go shopping and you wanted to be with her, so you spent hours shopping, but now you say, no, I've got something else to do. So what happens is couples drift apart, stop doing for one another what they love to do.
Yeah.
And I think what we have to do is we have to repair that by moving toward each other
Yes.
with actions of love. I think little things too, choosing each day to do the little things like make the coffee and wash the dishes and sweep up the floor and put the kids to bed. I think that what happens is we begin in this functional independence of each other,
right,
and we stop being tied together, communicating to each other, and thinking about what the other person's needs are.
Yeah.
People have love languages, Dr. Amir. And we're really wise if we learn their love language and begin to speak it. So my wife, Debbie, her love language is deeds, actions done for her. So she'll have in her mind when she wakes up a long list of things to do.
Yes.
And I'll say to her, what's on your mind? She'll give me her list. And I say, I can handle this and I can do this. But I'll take something off her list and actually do it. She feels like this relief. She feels loved,
right,
when I begin to take things that are burdening her.
Yes.
So, for instance, Debbie doesn't like to fill up her car with gas, and I'll say to her, I'm going to fill your tank up whether you like it or not. And when I stop, I get all the bugs off the windshield, and I'll take the car to the, for repairs and deal with the mechanics, so they figure that part out for her, so she doesn't have to think about those things.
Right.
So I'm thinking, if I'm on my game, Dr. Amir, what is it that I need to do for her,
right,
to show her love?
Yeah.
Because that's how she feels.
Right.
Me, on the other hand, my love language is time spent.
Okay.
So with our listeners, with you, Dr. Amir, I always feel loved when someone will spend time with me.
Sure.
Because that's the way I give love and receive love, is when someone spends time with me. So if Debbie is busy, she's on her laptop or she's talking to somebody, I can feel neglected.
Yes.
So I really like to connect with people.
Right.
I like that sort of that intimacy of sharing hearts.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite things to do at home is tea fellowship, of having tea to drink with somebody, just enjoy their presence.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, just that kind of quiet time.
Sure.
So when Debbie's speaking my love language, she'll speak in the area of time spent.
Yeah.
She'll connect with me on a personal level, spend time with me.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
And it's so important to know that language. My wife's is one of her love languages. I think they have a primary and a secondary, but
true.
one of them is gifts.
Yeah.
So she enjoys receiving gifts, and I enjoy seeing the response when she gets a gift. So I like to get her gifts, and for me, help, and I think touch is every man's love language.
Yes.
Pretty sure, probably, so but help, if she helps me, not that she goes and does something for me. But if she comes alongside and says, okay, what are you working on? Can I work on it with you and help you? That I feel tremendous love. And now the mistake a lot of people make is they'll project their own love language on the other person.
Yes, that's true.
So for example, if my love language is help, someone helping me, I feel loved, and hers is not help, and she's doing the dishes, and I go stand next to her and I say, let me dry while you wash, I think I'm showing love. That wouldn't be, it would be much better for me to bring her a rose and give her a rose than to try to help her at that point.
She may feel as if her space is being invaded.
Yeah.
Like, this is my room, my kitchen.
Exactly.
What are you doing in my kitchen?
Exactly.
Get out of here. Yeah.
Or if it's deeds, then it would be much better for me to say, why don't you go sit down and put your feet up and I'll wash the dishes for you. But that's not my love language, so I wouldn't do that, and then she wouldn't feel loved. And I'd get frustrated going, I'm showing you all this love.
Now for Debbie, that would work pretty well.
Right.
Just go ahead and take a rest, I'll take care of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is crucial. So there's a book called Love Languages.
Love languages, yes.
Yeah, certainly look into that. One thing I want to address, though, because we talked about the woman and the abuse she has received, and the inability to feel that bond in that relationship. Certainly Love Languages creates that bond. There's another book called The Love Dare, right? That's fantastic. Has saved a lot of marriages. But now what about the man? You see that the man can desensitize himself towards his wife by looking around.
Oh yeah.
By running around.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
By touching and doing things he's not supposed to.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, his wife is just another woman. And you see this there are some countries of other religions where they make women cover up their hair and their face and their body so that they'll all look the same. So you look around and a group of women might be walking and they're all covered head to toe with some sheet, and they all look the same. You don't even know if one of them is 90 years old and the other one is 18 years. You don't know. You can't tell. And you go, well, then they must have solved the problem, because men, even if they can't control their eyes and they look, they still wouldn't see anything. But that's not true, because what's happening, there's actually, look at the stats, there's actually more infidelity in those countries than there is in America.
I think, Dr. Amir, that days were easier when a man was behind a plow,
Yes,
looking at the backside of a bull,
that's right.
and then went home to his wife, because it's a vast improvement.
Yes,
So the days when we were agricultural, we weren't around women like we are today.
yeah,
Today we are surrounded by beautiful women we work with and come to see us, and I think we need to have boundaries. We need to have limits we put on ourselves of, I think to see somebody is one thing, but then to begin to undress her is another.
Yes.
And the lust after her.
exactly.
So we keep our hearts reserved for one,
Yes.
and we don't give our hearts away to another.
Yeah,
And we don't have lunches with, we don't drive in cars with, we exercise boundaries with the opposite sex. We don't tell our greatest secrets to them either.
of course.
Yes, we reserve that for our marriages.
Right.
So yeah, I think that the man is very easily can begin to look around and then play around, because he's not boundaried, right? Maybe he's wondering himself whether he still has the charm to draw a woman
Wow.
in. I wonder if he still thinks he's attractive to someone
Right.
else. And she begins then to compliment him on how handsome he is, or how strong he is, what a great man he is. He's not hearing these words at home. It feeds his ego, and now he begins very vulnerable, like an animal caught in a trap, to go after this
Right.
person who's bringing this positive affirmation to him. Maybe the other woman is speaking his love language in a way he's not hearing it at home.
Yeah. Well, that's a dangerous game right there. When I was really young, I used to say, I'm going to marry the most beautiful woman on earth. There's only one.
Yeah.
The most beautiful woman on earth. And here's how I justified it. I said, if there was only one woman on the planet Earth, who would be the most beautiful woman on earth? It'd be the one. If there were no other women, but this one was shaped weird, I wouldn't know any different because she's the only woman on earth. And if she had, I don't know, a weird mouth or eyes were strange or didn't have hair on one side of her head or whatever, or was missing a body part, or by any standard may not be attractive, but if on planet Earth there's only one and if you ask any man, they would say she's the most beautiful woman on earth.
Yes.
She's the most coveted. She's the one everybody wants to be with because there's only one.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, in my world, there's only one.
Yeah.
And so she is the most beautiful woman on earth.
Mm-hmm.
I found her, I married her, I got her. And I enjoy it all the time.
Yes.
All the time.
You claimed her.
That's the vision.
Yeah.
We don't look. We don't look. We don't wonder. We don't stray. We stay. And we will enjoy it. It will be fulfilling, amazing, incredible, awesome in every way. There is no broken relationship that cannot be restored if you seek God and you bring God and you say, this is broken, fix this, please.
Yes.
Because He wants it. Now, God's will is that every marriage survives, but not every marriage survives.
No.
So it has to be your will and her will and God's will. And now, when we work together and you make that commitment, you say, I made a commitment. I swore before God, before the pastor, and before everybody I care about, friends and family, that I was committed. I am going to stick to my word. We're going to work this out. And there's nobody else anyways. So if I leave, I'm either going to be alone, because there's only one woman on the planet Earth, so I'm either going to be all alone, or I'm going to do whatever it takes to please her, love her, show her I love and respect her, appreciate her.
I think part of this too, Dr. Amir, has to do with the fact that we're all flawed, and we all make mistakes, and we've all sort of crossed the lines. So forgiveness is really huge in terms of choosing to forgive the person before they ask for forgiveness.
Yeah.
So to the degree I become aware of their offenses, I may need to address them, but I really need to forgive them and not hold them against the person and create the wedge between us. Because what happens is this little offense becomes something I dwell upon.
Right.
And now it becomes a sort of a spirit of resentment.
Yes.
And now it becomes, we're not talking to each other.
Yes.
And now we get into independent lives. And now I become vulnerable to someone else. So really it has to go back to, what do I need to forgive and not hold against the person? Love keeps no account of wrongs suffered. So yes, I think there's the active side of love and the active side of forgiveness.
It's all love.
It's all
The
love.
greatest of these is love.
Yes.
So let's leave you with the advice that, learn about the love languages.
Yeah.
Consider the love there in a relationship that's struggling. Learn to forgive, be forgiving, be loving, be appreciative, and invite God to tell you what to do and to mend all these relationships. You will be glad.
Yeah. Very good, Dr. Amir. Until next time.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Wow.